Welcome to Re-Educated TV, where we keep you informed. We all have come to know the Amazonians from the Amazon of Brazil, but Amazonians once inhabited the entire globe. Before we proceed, we should first establish the origin and definition of the word Amazon. Here we have a depiction of an ancient Amazon of Egypt. Amazon means male and female as one. Later it was given the name Sphinx by the Greeks, said to be from the verb sphingein. So, Sphinx means to bind or to squeeze, to bind and squeeze the male and female together, or to squeeze both principles together as one. The verb sphingein means the begotten of both principles. So the Amazon, or the Sphinx if you prefer, were built by the Ionians, who were the worshippers of the double principle, or the acknowledgers of this Amazon or deity. The ancient Ionians of the ancient Sphinx of Egypt were very ancient. They were long before the era of Khufu, or long before the Khazars, long before the Greeks and others. I should add that the Greeks were once Ionians. The Greeks had many names and titles before they were Greeks. No, not many people are aware that the adoration or the worship of the Amazon was the first religion. The Amazon of the ancients was the double being. The word Amazon is composed of two very ancient words. The first is Amma, or Ma, which in old languages means mother. The second is an ancient name of the sun, which was spelt and pronounced in various ways around the globe. Zon, Z-O-N, Zan, Z-A-N, Zone, Z-O-A-N, and Z-A-O-N. The Suanes and Soanes of Colchis were sometimes called Zanai, or Zainai, Zanaite, and also Sanaite. This Amazon or double principle is in the first book of Genesis, in the Indus called the Ras or Razit. It is also in the book of Genesis of the Holy Bible. The ancients considered the first creation of humankind to be the man and woman as one being, and therefore their God or first being was seen as androgynous. In Genesis chapter 2 verse 23 says that the woman was made not only from the bones but from the flesh of the man, the double being, out of which it is said God formed the man and the woman. So the book of Genesis described the man and woman as being one at first creation, that they were an androgynous being. It was afterward the woman came from the rib of the man, according to Genesis. Now, is it just me? Why did not the man came from the rib of the woman? After all, every man came from the womb of their mother. The concept of God created man in his own image should also be questioned. Why was it not said that God made woman in his own image? Or who said the Most High was he or she? These are questions one should ask. It was man who made God in his image, and not God made man in his image. However, the first being was made to be androgynous. Therefore, their God was androgynous, or of the double principle. The worship of the ancient Amazon can be found around the world. There were once the Ionians of the ancient Indus, the Ionians of ancient Asia, the Ionians of ancient Greece, the ancient Ionians of Africa, the ancient Ionians of Rome, the Ionians of ancient Ireland, the British Isles, the Ionians of ancient America, the Ionians of Jamaica, Barbados, Antigua, the Caribbean, the Ionians of Brazil, the Ionians of the entire world. They were called Ionians because they were the worshippers of Iones, the one who was made to hold the keys to the universe, which was depicted as male and female as one. It was not until the wars and separation between the followers of the female principle and the followers of the male principle, when we saw separate depictions, where it was either made male by the followers of the male principle or female by the followers of the female principle. In the Indus, the Ioni or Yoni represented the female, and the Linga represented the male. In Egypt, the obelisk represented the male, and there were no depictions of the female principle. So Egypt have been conquered over the centuries by the followers of the male principle, and every time the obelisks were saved by the invaders. But the same can't be said about the Amazon or the monuments of the female principle. The Sphinx was destroyed by them, it seems, but was rebuilt or renovated to its present state in the late 1800s to early 1900s. And there are pictures to prove this point. Furthermore, we find Cambyses restoring the temple of the male principle at Jerusalem and destroying the other temples. And as it is stated, where they could, the Persians destroyed the sphinxes, but leaving the obelisk, the emblem of the linga. The lingas were not touched by the Persians, even though they had hieroglyphics of gods and goddesses. They were spared because the pillars were lingas. Now, the Isis sitting on the lotus with the solar glory is another example of this kind of double being. The mythos of Seth, Isis and Osiris, the one which says Osiris was slain by his brother Seth, who severed his brother's body into several pieces and had him thrown in the river Nile, but his severed genitals were quickly recovered by Isis, who made good use of it, and from that union came Horus. This is a perfect example of the Amazon in a esoteric form. In the mythology of Venus, who was considered the goddess of love, duty, and procreation, and was always followed by Hero, known more famously around the world as Cupid, Venus was born from the severed genitals of the god Uranus, after Cronus threw them in the sea near Cyprus. So the Hindus, the Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans shared the same mythos of the Amazon. The worship of the Amazon can be found throughout the Indus. Homer states the Amazon to have come from the Indus. There is an Amazon with only one breast in the cave of Elephanta in India. And Mr. Faber says the Amazon of the Elephanta pagoda and the Greek Aphrodite is nothing but a hermaphrodite deity, who is called by the Hindus Ardhanari, who is formed by the lateral conjunction of Shiva with Parvati. This mythical figure of the Indus from head to feet is depicted by the Hindus to be a male on the right side and a female on the left side of this Amazon or statue. This is a representation of the consort of Shiva, exhibiting the active power of her lord, not only as Bhavani or courage, but as Isani, or the goddess of nature, considered to be male and female, and presiding over generation. The Amazon is also found in the caves at Mahabalipur, in the institutes of Menu, who we know as Noah. It is written that he divided his own subsistence. The mighty power became half male and half female. Brahma is said to have manifested himself in a human shape when one half of his body sprang from the other, in which there was no diminution, and out of the severed moiety he framed a woman, denominated Iva, and later Eva, then Eve, or Satarupa. After some time the other half of his body sprang from him, and became Swayambhuva, or Adima. From their embrace were born 3 sons. So these are Amazons from the Indus. Now, the people, the Amazonians, and the places they inhabited were called the Amazon. The city of the sun in Egypt, called Heliopolis, or On, was also called Zone, among other names. The word zone implies the male principle. The word Amma was clearly removed. Heliopolis, or the city of On, was also called Tafnes, and Fonsalis, and Baalbek, and Baalbeth. There was also a city in Africa called Zona, taken by the Roman general Cestius. Also a city of Zona of the Amazons in Cappadocia, or Armenia. there was a temple in Thrace called Zone, according to some. It is said that the largest body of people that went under the name of Amazon settled upon the Atlantic in Africa, at the extreme part of that region. They are spoken of in the history of Marina, who was said or supposed to have lived in the time of Horus, or Horus, the son of Isis, and to have conquered Africa and the greater part of Asia, but was slain in Thrace, according to the stories. Amazons were also said to be found in Mount Caucasus in Albania and near the Palus Moetis. Polyanius speaks of Amazon in India, and they are also mentioned in Nanius. They are found in Ethiopia. They at one time possessed all Ionia, and there were traditions of them being at Samos. And in Italy, there was a town in Messapia towards the lower part of Italy named Amazonia. Even the Athenians and Botanians were of the same family. Hence, it is said that Cadmus had an Amazonian wife when he went to Thebes, and that her name was Sphinx. Right? So clearly, these stories were traditional and allegorical, because the Sphinx was not a real person. The Sphinx was a depiction of the double principle. Some of the stories of the Amazonians around the world were traditional and allegorical and not literal. However, the Amazonians inhabited all of Africa, or many locations throughout the continent of Africa. Their stories lived on somewhat, but the word Amazon and its definition was gradually forgotten or came out of use. So, we should bear in mind that the stories of the Amazons around the world should not be taken literal. They are the traditional stories of the inventors, whom were called Amazonians or Ionians, who were the worshippers of this double principle, and they were Negroid, as Mr. Higgins lets us know, and there is ample evidence to prove this point, by way of several authors, murals, paintings, and statues. Yet still we still have persons that believe that their history is being taken. The fact is, all these nations were Negroid, as Mr. Higgins informs us, along with the monuments, paintings, and murals. Again, Mr. Higgins says they were Negroid, and they were the inventors of time. And evidence of these great people can be seen through the Tauric worship, the zodiac division into 360 parts, or 360 days. He also stated that they flourished thousands of years or 5,000 years before the era of Christ. They were highly civilized and were the builders of many stone cycles or stone structures in the form of circles around the world, including Stonehenge, Easter Island, and the Sphinx of Egypt. They were the Amazonians and Cyclopeans, whom were the inventors of arithmetic. The Amazons and Cyclops were said to worship atop of mountains, in stone cycles of which they were the inventors, in which they erected in accordance with the cycles of the planetary bodies, which the structures clearly prove that the builders were highly advanced in the sciences. Just to add, there were said to be hieroglyphics at the base of the statues of Easter Island. Where are they now? Now, Mr. Bailey also confirms that these people were highly civilized and that they flourished 1,000 or 1,500 years before the sun entered Aries, or before the era of Krishna. These highly civilized people were Buddhist by degrees. Now, there were Amazonian Colchians who were noticed as being particularly black. The Iberians, the Cimmerians, the Maatei, the Atlanteans of Mauritania, and all the Ionians were Amazons and were called Azones or Amazones or Alazones and Amazoni. They were also called Siri and Assyri and Chaldee and later Chaldean. They were called Mori and Chalybes, and they were the ones who were said to have founded the cities of Ephesus and Smyrna and other regions. The Phoenicians, or the Ethiopian Phoenician Memnonites, were also of the double principle. They were the Jews, whose goddess was called Io, or Queen Europa, and they were also noticed as being Negroid by several ancient authors. In fact, the three Ethiopias were the Indus, Egypt, and Arabia. Now, Mr. Wilford, in his treatise on Egypt and the Nile in the Asiatic Researches, informs us that the very ancient statues in the Indus are Negroid, with crisp, curly, woolly hair, flat noses, and thick lips, and that a race of Negroes formerly had power and preeminence in India. This is confirmed by Mr. Maurice and Colonel FitzClarence in the journal of his journey from India, and Maurice, in his first volume of his Indian Antiquities, states that the figures in the caves of India and in the temples in Egypt are no doubt the same. Strabo confirms that the Hindus and the Egyptians were the same. They were called Ari and Ethiopians by the ancient author Apuleius, which means the black Arai or Ari of the Indus. These people inhabited all these regions, and they were the Amazons or Amazonians. And Sir William Jones informs us that there was a great nation of blacks that formerly possessed the dominion of Asia. Mr. Maurice states that they are the Cushites or Kuthites, described in Genesis. They were described as being Negroid, and this is corroborated by the translators of the Pentateuch, called the 70, where they constantly refer to Cush as Ethiopia. Mr. Jones also lets us know that they were the inhabitants of Sidon. Now, the people of Arabia were called Cushin by the Hebrew text of the Old Testament, and Ethiopianos by the writers of the Septuagint or the 70. The Sabaeans, who are the Cushites or Ethiopians, extended from the Red Sea to the Persian Gulf, which is the whole of Arabia. The Ethiopians of Africa are commonly called Ludim, both by ancient and modern writers. Ludim is the plural of Lud, the eponymous ancestor. The word Cush and Ethiopia means black, as Mr. Prey shows. The Chaldeans substituted the TAU for the shin, thus Kut was Kus. In their dialect, the Kuthites were the same as the Kushites. Now, Herodotus says that there were two Ethiopian nations, one in India and one in Egypt, and he got his information from the Egyptian priest. Philostratus says that the gymnosophists of Ethiopia and the Indians were the same. Eustathius, another ancient writer, also states that the Ethiopians and the Indians were the same great empire. So Homer, Herodotus, and others confirms that there were two Ethiopias that later branched out and became three Ethiopias: the Indus, Egypt, and Arabia. Or as the Bishop of Avranches says, there were three Kush: Ethiopia, Arabia, and Susiana. Three Ethiopias mean three countries of black. Memnon or Amenophis was their king, and we have seen the bust and statue of Memnon, which was depicted Negroid. And just to add, Vergyl and Pindar says Memnon is black, as we have seen. Now, the Greek writers referred to them as most warlike race. Pliny says their shield was in the form of the leaf of the Indian fig tree, and on it they carried a lunette. This was a depiction of the Arga or boat of India. Monuments were shown in various places where they are said to have had battles and been slain, as at Megara, Charania, Scotosia, Kudnaskafale, also in Ionia and Mauritania, and even within the walls of Athens. A well-known celebrated invasion of Attica by them was recorded. The Athenians showed the place where in this invasion the battle was fought. A truce was made, and a stone pillar erected to record the event, and it was called the Amazonium. The commander of the Amazons is stated to have been a foreigner from Egypt, a Thracian, and an Athenian, whose name was Eumolphus. A temple in Athens was said to have been built by them. Now, the place where the truce was made was called Horcomoseum. Here we have a perfect example of Grecian History. Here are all the particulars of the war, monuments to those slain in battle, places deriving their names from the events of the war, temples erected, treaties of peace. As mentioned, all this should not be taken literal. There were several wars and treaties between the worshippers of the male principle and the worshippers of the female principle, and there were people or places ruled by women, meaning women were the head or government. But the stories of the Amazonians found around the world are false, or should I say traditional. We must take into consideration that the three principles were one before the separation between the rival sects of the Brahma Maya, the Yoni alone and the Linga alone, and later when the truce was made, there was a reunion of all three, which the various mythos allude to. The Amazons were the builders of Ephesus, which was the chief seat of the Amazonian Ionian. This temple was said to have been burnt to the ground by the same Ionians, which confuses many, but is easily explained. So where it says, or where it is stated that they were the builders of Ephesus, and subsequently the destroyers, are referring to the wars fought over said location, victories and battles lost, and at times the unity of them all. Just to add, the triple principle is the man, woman, and child, and the double principle is man and woman. The yoni is the pom-pom, and the linga is the male genital. As mentioned earlier, the Amazon was heard of no more, and the separate principles continued. As mentioned before, the ancient Jews were once the worshippers of the god Io, considered to be a woman, the beautiful Io, as they would say. The Romish Church also adopted the god or goddess or queen of heaven, whom they call the Mother of God, the Regina Caeli, as they call her. This goddess Io was given the name Mero, said to be the matriarch of Africa. She was then given the name Meropa, Merope, and Europe. Her name was Maya, the mother of Buddha, and therefore the mother of all the gods. She was Rhea, the wife of Noah, or the wife of Saturn in another instance. She was also called Mother of Nature and Mother of Creation, among other names. Before we move on, Lucian, in his dialogue between Vulcan and Jupiter, calls Minerva an Amazon, which is true, as I have shown, that Minerva is a double principle. In fact, it is a depiction of the male and female Menu, or Noah. Now, there was Kuma, Marina, Ania, Eldea, Merle, Paphos, Kuna, and many others. Mr. Faber states that the statues of Amazons are said to have been worshipped at most of the places named, and that they were statues of the double being, or double god, or of the first man and woman mentioned in Genesis, made after the image of man, as they say. Now, during the wars between the Yoni and the Linga, or the wars between the followers of the female principle and the followers of the male principle, and the followers of the double principle, the double principle is really the triple principle, the man, woman, and child, the Trinity, the Trimurti. A sect of Jews or Amazons traveled to the Americas 5,200 and odd years before Christ, or round about, in the time or the zodiac when the sun entered Aries, and there were others that were said to have made the journey 3,000 years before Christ, or before the first year AD, and they were Negroid, or black, whichever you prefer, as Mr. Higgins and Lord Kingsborough lets us know. I have shown the customs, religions, way of life, and languages of these people. They are of the great and mighty hive of Tartary. The Olmecs, Mayans, Incas, and many other groups were Amazonians and Cyclopes and Cyclops or Cyclopean. The word Cyclops or Cyclopean does not mean a one-eye monster. It means the people of the cycles or time. There are several stories pertaining to Amazonians, which include a mythical race of women. They are traditional stories. The Amazonians inhabited several locations in the Americas. They inhabited the Caribbean, and they were given the name Carib, and Arawak, Calusa, Giaga, Black Bombo, and the Black Amazonians of Brazil, who were said to have beards, and several other tribes, all made known by Lord Kingsborough and Mr. Higgins. Tradition say that the Caribbean was once called Zanai or Zayanai, and their customs are of the ancient Jews or the ancient Amazonians. And of course, we know of the Amazon of Brazil. The inhabitants of Florida prayed to the god Hoana, who is Joanna or Ayanes, which is the double principle, a Amazon, as Mr. Higgins informs us. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. See you soon. Take care.